British media reported Wednesday that Ukraine had fired Storm Shadow missiles supplied by Britain into Russian territory for the first time. The weapons had been used against Russian forces in occupied Ukraine, including this attack on Russia's former Black Sea Fleet headquarters in Crimea last year. London and Kyiv refused to confirm the latest reports. Earlier this week, Ukraine's forces fired US-supplied longer-range ATACMS missiles deep into Russian territory after Washington gave the go-ahead Sunday. France has also supplied Ukraine with its version of the Storm Shadow missiles, known as Scalp. The European missiles differ from the American ATACMS, says defence analyst Patrick Berry of the University of Bath.
They're air-launched missiles, but generally, depending on the export variant, usually got a range of 250 kilometres or 155 miles or so. I think that given the ATACMS has a longer range than that and isn't air-launched, so therefore it's harder to intercept, in theory at least.
Both weapon systems will open a range of new targets.
The range of both missiles is enough to get behind Russian lines and into Russian infrastructure targets, so that will cut off their supplies to their front line. So the actual range of each missile is not as significant as the fact that Ukraine needs them in great quantity and very fast indeed.
Ukraine will have to select its targets carefully, says analyst Berry.
Are you going to allow them to actually up the ante and start hitting energy infrastructure, military infrastructure, stuff that will, oil refineries, etc., stuff that would really start to hurt the Russian economy? That's the question.
Meanwhile, Germany, Ukraine's second biggest supplier of arms, this week ruled out giving Kyiv its long-range Taurus cruise missiles. Berlin fears being dragged into the war.
Nothing had changed for us. The situation, the circumstances are the same. And Taurus is Taurus and not ATACMS or Storm Shadow. So our perspective on that issue is the same.
The future of Western military aid to Kyiv remains uncertain. US President-elect Donald Trump has pledged to end the war on his first day in office. Kyiv fears US support may be cut. Britain and France could opt to continue supplying Ukraine with missiles, says Berry.
They're both nuclear powers. They can take that risk if they want to and lean into it. I think you might find a divergence between European NATO and the US NATO on some policy issues around Ukraine.
Following Washington's decision to approve Ukrainian missile strikes inside Russia, Moscow this week lowered its threshold for the use of nuclear weapons. Henry Ridgwell, VOA News.
Air raid signals could be heard in the Ukrainian capital of Kyiv all day, triggered by warnings of a significant attack. The threat prompted the U.S. Embassy to shut down. Canada and other countries followed suit.
I can't get into obviously the specifics of the threat, but it's something that we always monitor closely. We take the safety and security of our personnel it's very important to us.
No attack materialized. Ukraine's military intelligence called it an intimidation tactic. Normal operations at the embassy will resume Thursday. The latest threat came after back-to-back Ukrainian strikes on Russian territory with U.S. and British-supplied missiles for the first time. This strike hitting a command post in Kursk region, according to Kyiv. And the Biden administration is sending more support, including anti-personnel mines, which are banned by many countries.
Later today, the White House will be announcing additional security assistance for Ukraine worth up to $275 million to meet critical battlefield needs.
Some Democrats worried about the Trump administration applauding the rush of weaponry.
The Biden administration for the next 2 months need to be MAGA-proofing Ukraine.
All of this a signal of escalation from the U.S., said Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Russia has warned it will respond strongly, all while President Vladimir Putin has said he's open to talk about a possible ceasefire in Ukraine with the Trump administration. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
after President Biden allowed Ukraine to strike parts of Russia with U.S.-built and proffered missiles, Putin is threatening to retaliate with strikes against U.S. facilities and says his military hit Ukraine today with a medium-range hypersonic ballistic missile. The Pentagon just responded moments ago. Watch this.
We've seen this type of dangerous, reckless rhetoric before from President Putin. What we're focused on is continuing to support Ukraine with what it needs.
Chief Foreign Correspondent Trey Yingst reports live from Kyiv. He has been watching all of this up close and was in the tunnels with President Zelensky just the other day. Trey, what about this new development?
Yeah, Martha, good afternoon. We know that overnight Russia launched a new missile into Ukraine targeting the southern city of Dnipro. This was the first time that such a large weapon was used on the battlefield since this conflict began 2.5 years ago. And it raises questions about the message that Russia is trying to send. Ukraine initially claimed the missile was an intercontinental ballistic missile, but Russian President Putin says it was an intermediate ballistic missile. The Russian leader said in the future, civilians will be warned to leave areas where more advanced missiles will be launched. Putin added this about the involvement of the West.
We consider ourselves in the right to use our weapons against those nations that use their weapons against us. And in terms of escalation, we will respond as surely and clearly.
The escalation comes as Ukrainian forces are now targeting deeper into Russia using U.S. and British-supplied long-range missiles, while overnight the Biden administration approved the transfer of anti-personnel mines to Ukraine. These moves are seen by the Russians as crossing a red line, prompting officials here in Kyiv to brace for an increase in missile and drone attacks. Martha?
All right, Trey, thank you.
19 ноября 6 оперативно-тактическими ракетами атакам с производства США и 21 ноября в ходе комбинированной ракетной атаки системами Storm Shadow производства Великобритании и HIMARS производства США были нанесены удары по военным объектам на территории Российской Федерации в Брянской и Курской областях. С этого момента, как мы неоднократно подчеркивали, ранее спровоцированный Западом региональный конфликт на Украине приобрел элементы глобального характера. Наши системы противовоздушной обороны отражали эти атаки. В результате цели, которые очевидно были поставлены перед собой противником, не достигнуты. Еще раз хочу особо подчеркнуть, что применение противником подобного оружия не в состоянии повлиять на ход боевых действий в зоне специальной военной операции. Наши войска успешно наступают по всей линии боевого соприкосновения. Все задачи, которые мы перед собой ставим, будут решены. В ответ на применение американского и британского дальнобойного оружия 21 ноября текущего года российские вооруженные силы нанесли комбинированный удар по одному из объектов оборонно-промышленного комплекса Украины. В боевых условиях было проведено в том числе и испытание одной из новейших российских ракетных систем средней дальности. В данном случае с баллистической ракетой в безъядерном гиперзвуковом оснащении. Наши ракетчики назвали ее «Орешник». Испытания прошли успешно. Цель пуска достигнута. Повторю, испытания в боевых условиях ракетной системы «Орешник» проводятся нами в ответ на агрессивные действия стран НАТО в отношении России. Вопрос о дальнейшем развертывании ракет средней и меньшей дальности будет решаться нами в зависимости от действий США и их сателлитов.